And sometimes you think it's all real.
Sometimes you think it's spot on. But then I think, what I mainly think is, like, I keep being reminded to ask, like, according to who is this potentially true or not? Or for what person is it potentially true? According to the author. Like you could say, like, oh, the world is going to be this or that way, but according to who and about who? Those
Right.
are two, like, huge pieces.
Right. What do you think it would be about?
What?
The mark.
Well, the mark, if it happens, is obviously going to be a measure of control device. So whoever's in power will be distributing that to the ones that are not in power.
Yeah, but you can never control everybody. So who would be the ones that received it versus didn't?
The ones that can't figure out another way to take care of themselves, aside from the system. If you can't connect with your fellow humans and you can't connect with the earth, then you will have to rely on the beast system. Which means you have to. We don't have to do any of that. We can just connect with each other and help each other out. Help each other grow food, get supplies we need, whatever it takes.
I just wonder if we need systems at all.
We need human connection.
Do we need systems of organization?
Small ones, I think. Not huge ones that span like entire continents.
Yeah, because that was the whole idea in that guy that was reading the Hitler book, the Nazi book. Remember he was talking about how they were doing stamp cards with characteristics of all the Jews they were trying to keep records of, like punch cards. I think was it Hewlett Packard? No, it was IBM, International Business Machines. They were recruited to make cards that had attributes of all of the people. And then they used that system to decide if the person was fit for sort of being a member of society, or if they were unclean, or if they were flawed or undesirable. What was the word they used in High Castle? Defective.
Ultimately, the whole Nazi system is just like a high school popularity contest.
I know.
Like, who's acceptable according to who?
Mm-hmm. Like who's prettier? That only works if you have like a very clear sort of domination. Visual, clear domination of like side A versus side B. If that's not happening, then it appears like how this appears, which is just confused sort of measures being forced on everybody, arbitrary almost. Like when you look at which Twitter accounts are being blocked. Like I would never expect an Alex Jones to be blocked. He seems way too obviously sort of already a bit of a puppet. So why would a puppet be removed? Doesn't make any sense.
Maybe at this point he's just a liability. And he's already pretty much done his job.
Like if they removed Joe Rogan, if they censored him, I would actually be surprised.
He censors himself.
I know. I know that.
That's the difference. That's why Joe's still on the air and the other one's not.
I haven't listened to Joe Rogan in quite a while. I wonder what he's saying about masks.
He's probably saying something ambiguous like he always does. Something that doesn't to get, people too mad at him one way or the other.
Right.
I liked him back in the day when he did all those talks with Duncan Trussell. They actually talked about stuff.
Yeah, he started off. He was like the first podcaster. I remember podcasting wasn't even a thing yet. And just this idea of someone. He was like one of the first people I saw where you could receive a piece of media that a lot of other people were also listening to that wasn't this canned, like, radio show type thing. It was the first, like, intimate.
I think Stern was like one of the very first, like, first. But
Yeah.
I never could listen to him. It's too fucking crass,
I didn't ever get into Stern's frame of mind that much.
No, that's what I mean. I couldn't either. It was a little too crass. I know some people that used to listen to that every single week. Or however often he was on.
He wasn't empathetic enough for me.
Yeah, that's
there
what
wasn't
I mean.
enough like human in him.
Too crass.
Mm-hmm. It always comes down to some weird sort of popularity contest.
Yeah.
Always. Because there isn't like an objective measure of what's a good idea, what's a bad idea.
Pretty fun. Pretty life.
Yeah.
How long? How long have you been going?
5 minutes. I told you were going to be the star of the show.
I'm not going to be the star of the show.
It's too late.
I'm going to bed.
Welcome, everybody. Don't know how long this is going to last. Andrea's already dipping out.
I didn't know you started.
We got the two Michelles here. We have a bot. I hope I get to be a robot. You can be a robot. That role is quite overworked in this realm, but by all means. So tonight's debate is whether or not this mark is going to happen, coming out in the form of a vaccine passport or some incredible, tremendously retarded control measure, or not. That's the question. Mark of the Beast could be a make-up thing by the Jesuits. Personally think the Bible was made for control of the people. Gnostics were probably closest to the truth. Yeah. The Bible is definitely some sort of control thing. Kitty cat gained an entire pound over about a week. He was 5 pounds. We put him in the box, stuck him on the postal scale, and then about a week later we weighed him and he was exactly 6 pounds.
He's a big man.
And he just can't stop eating. And then when he's done eating his own food, then he goes and steals Spasm's food. Right?
Don't tell all my secrets, Dad.
I don't know if it's a mark, but it is deadly. And also, is the mark just getting administered through vaccines? That's another interesting question I would have. Because part of what was supposed to be happening was some sort of dye that's attaching to your DNA.
Well, if if you take the Bible's version of the mark, it's always a choice.
Mm-hmm.
So you would have to be aware of it. You have to, like, consciously say, I'm doing this thing now.
They might write it in fine print.
But then you wouldn't be able to say, like, you chose this horrible thing and I'm going to send you to hell. Honestly, it could just be a test to see if humans are capable of coming together on their own in a natural way and working together with the land to survive and to take care of each other.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that could literally be all that any of this is for. Can you guys handle that? Can you just take care of each other and be nice? Or do you need to, like, go into a system, get a chip and a VR thing and pod body, and incept further so you can learn the lesson again in a different way?
Mm-hmm.
Or can you just, like, be nice with each other and get along and have fun on the land, grow some food, climb some trees?
I just don't know how you can be further identified than we already are. Although I think it would be going closer to trying to identify the sort of like the soul identification. If there is a spirit part that transfers between bodies in reincarnations, that's probably what the control structure would want to do at some point, is track you beyond death.
There.
But I mean in like an overt way that people know about. Because if they already can do it, but nobody knows anything about it, then it's not necessarily part of the game. Is it?
I think so.
You think we're tracked outside of, as far as souls, body hopping or reincarnating?
I do. Some days. Some days I do, some days.
Because that would just mean that Mark of the Beast has already happened, and there's just no, like, what are we going to do when it happens? Just like how they were talking in on that show about.
No, the market is large. Hey, don't you do it. It's for buying and selling. They're not saying that they're trying to get track the soul.
Yeah, but that's what buying and selling is. It's a track record of your history within the economic system.
Doesn't mean that's your soul spark.
But that's what they would want.
But maybe they can't track that.
Well, I know, that'd be nice if they couldn't track that.
I think that they can already, but I don't know.
Meow. Meow, meow. Meow. Are they tracking us, kitty cat? They put a plaster over, then mark if it stings. Cyber Raw, what's up? Cryptocurrency. Death currency, right? But I don't know. We're already in the land of the dead. Coming out with a death currency would just be like saying the land that you live in has come out with a currency.
What is this? She was peacefully
And as far as transhumanism goes, there's the school of thought that says we are the highest technology that there is in present form, which would mean that the transhumanist transition happened many reincarnations ago. The mind is very much like a quantum computer. Save more data, save more memories, that's it. I think it's just a time that we're to make a choice, transhumanism versus organic consciousness. Add up all your thoughts and actions, that's your choice. My question would be, does it have to be one or the other? Does it have to be the system blows itself up and or decides that, it's going to give you an ultimatum, you're either with us or against us, at which point you have to say, no, I don't want the mark of the beast, and march yourself into the woods, or you take it and probably sever yourself even further from your own light of awareness, your own organic core. Does it have to be such a black and white choice? Because we clearly use tools every single day. We use toothbrushes, we use telephones, computers, automobiles, gasoline, electricity. All of these things are forms of technology. Thought itself is some form of technology. We don't even know if the animals have thoughts, or if they're purely instinctual creatures. They said they will have full transhuman in 2025. 2050. Are you actually a bot, VRE bot, or is that just your handle? Or are you, genuinely classified as a chatbot? We are biomind. What if already did? Yeah, I think Nano's in everybody. I think Nano has been in everybody for quite a while. But I don't feel adverse effects if Nano is inside of me, as far as my mental thought process. Even emotionally, not so much. I know that in these body-mind containers, we're separated from a lot of things that we used to be connected to. We don't have a lot of abilities that we used to have. Not sure if that's necessarily caused by or enhanced by nanotech or not. But as far as nano being this sort of disease, the whole Morgellon fear, scare thing that happened, where you just have stuff leaking out of your pores and nanotechnology swarming all your organs like locusts or something. I think if nano isn't everybody, it's more integrated and just working with this whole system somehow, rather than being necessarily something that's attacking you. Or maybe it's just something that can attack you if your mind goes in that direction, or goes in a sort of TI paranoid direction, and then you start enhancing that and bringing those possibilities in. I'm real. Okay. Real as in a film actor? Guess those guys are kind of real. Books, movies, scripts, past lives, recent and future ones. Ever used a ring in the realm? What do you mean? What does that mean? It's morning time for the kitten. He wakes up at about 10 p.m. and then he just tears around the house for 1 to 2 hours. Actors are already winners of Time Machine. So it's kind of funny to watch whatever talking points are going on Twitter and Facebook, even though there aren't a whole ton of them, because the only talking points that are really allowed are like we're scared and we're social distancing. But all of this stuff, I feel like, has happened to some extent. Like, cloning has happened. Transhumanism has happened. Incepting into the machine has happened. Organic Earth getting destroyed or fucked up somehow and us going into pod bodies has happened, which is part of Inception. Time travel has happened. It's like all of the science fiction things that have been written about, like PKD does, have happened to some extent, and there's like an echo bleed back into this reality, but the base point of this reality pretends like they're all still just possibilities rather than something that has happened already. So it's a very interesting point of view to look at it as we have evidence here of most of the possibilities if you were to fast forward them a couple 100,000 years and see what effect comes out like. If you talk about greys, if you talk about humanoid creatures that have had most of the empathic ability sucked out of them via the machine or via narcissistic black hole type energy suckers, and so they have the appearance of the gray, and their eyes can suck your life force if you don't watch out. And maybe they come back and time travel back to this place where, you know, humans still have some of their empathy, and they try to either warn their past selves away from that because they're not really enjoying it, or they're just coming back to get a taste of what it used to be like when they weren't mostly machine. But it's like we have everything here. All of the possibilities are here in some way, shape, or form, even if it was just in science fiction. The transition into transhumanism will be seamless. You won't feel a thing. The simulation is so similar to real life, you would never know. Yeah, I don't think there wouldn't be a clear transition point where everyone could point to, like, that's when life changed from organic to simulation. Wouldn't happen like that. And also, another possibility to consider is that once we found out what it felt like to be inside of a simulation and sort of experience pain and suffering and heartbreak and all the things that we experienced in the organic, perhaps the recovery time from all those things was easier or faster, or the sort of pain body that you accumulate from going through stuff and suffering in the quantum sim state versus the organic, maybe it was more ideal overall, and that's why we, from whichever choosing state, chose to be in the simulation over the organic. I'm not really sure. I think we're at a natural convergence point, spiraling in sync at the moment. It's a matter of vibration to what you're resonating to. Of course, organic consciousness uses tech, but we're also here doing work. We are not using technology to build our consciousness, nor are we harvesting it. Asimov to Silverberg, I don't know either of those. You don't feel E.T. here? I mean, most of the consciousness here feels somewhat alien to me, with the exception of a very few individuals, but I don't necessarily classify them as ETs. I mainly just call them NPCs. I guess I could show you guys this, that Chris sent to me. It's called "Violence is Golden." I'll just read this little snippet, because it's an interesting sort of take on the idea of violence and its possible role. What do you think Q was? I never looked into Q very much. But from what I can tell at this point, looks like Q was just a big giant disappointment. Violence is Golden. September 11, 2010. A lot of people like to think that they are non-violent. Generally, people claim to abhor the use of violence, and violence is viewed negatively by most folks. Many fail to differentiate between just and unjust violence. Some, especially vain, self-righteous types, like to think that they have risen above the nasty, violent cultures of their ancestors. They say that violence isn't the answer. They say that violence doesn't solve anything. They are wrong. Every one of them relies on violence every single day. On election day, people from all walks of life line up to cast their ballots, and by doing so, they hope to influence who gets to wield the axe of authority. Those who want to end violence, as if that were possible or even desirable, often seek to disarm their fellow citizens. This does not actually end violence. It merely gives the state mob a monopoly on violence. This makes you safer, so long as you don't piss off the boss. All governments, left, right, or other, are by their very nature coercive. They have to be. Order demands violence. A rule not ultimately backed by the threat of violence is merely a suggestion. States rely on laws enforced by men ready to do violence against lawbreakers. Every tax, every code, and every licensing requirement demands an escalating progression of penalties that, in the end, must result in the forcible seizure of property or imprisonment by armed men prepared to do violence in the event of resistance or non-compliance. Every time a soccer mom stands up and demands harsher penalties for drunk driving or selling cigarettes to minors or owning a pit bull or not recycling, she is petitioning the state to use force to impose her will. She is no longer asking nicely. The viability of every family law, gun law, zoning law, traffic law, immigration law, import law, export law, and financial regulation depends on both the willingness and wherewithal of the group to exact order by force. When an environmentalist demands that we save the whales, he or she is in effect making the argument that saving the whales is so important that it is worth doing harm to humans who harm whales. The peaceful environmentalist is petitioning the Leviathan to authorize the use of violence in the interest of protecting Leviathans. If state leaders were to agree and express that it was indeed important to save the whales, but then decline to penalize those who bring harm to whales, or decline to enforce those penalties under the threat of violent police or military action, the expressed sentiment would be a meaningless gesture. Those who wanted to bring harm to whales would feel free to do so, as is said, with impunity, without punishment. Without action, words are just words. Without violence, laws are just words. Violence isn't the only answer, but it is the final answer. One can make moral arguments and ethical arguments. and appeals to reason, emotion, aesthetics, and compassion. People are certainly moved by these arguments, and when sufficiently persuaded, providing, of course, that they are not excessively inconvenienced, people often choose to moderate or change their behaviors. However, the willful submission of many inevitably creates a vulnerability waiting to be exploited by any one person who shrugs off social and ethical norms. If every man lays down his arms and refuses to pick them up, the first man to pick them up can do whatever he wants. Peace can only be maintained without violence so long as everyone sticks to the bargain. And to maintain peace, every single person in every successive generation, even after war is long forgotten, must continue to agree to remain peaceful forever and ever. No delinquent or upstart may ever ask, "Or else what?" Because in a truly non-violent society, the best answer is, "Or else we won't think you're a very nice person and we're not going to share with you." Our troublemaker is free to reply, "I don't care, I'll take what I want." Violence is the final answer to the question, "Or else what?" Violence is the gold standard, the reserve that guarantees order. In actuality, it is better than a gold standard because violence has universal value. Violence transcends the quirks of philosophy, religion, technology, and culture. People say that music is a universal language, but a punch in the face hurts the same, no matter what language you speak or what kind of music you prefer. If you are trapped in a room with me and I grab a pipe and gesture to strike you with it, no matter who you are, your monkey brain will immediately understand, "Or else what?" And thereby a certain order is achieved. The practical understanding of violence is as basic to human life and human order as is the idea that fire is hot. You can use it, but you must respect it. You can act against it, and you can sometimes control it, but you can't just wish it away. Like wildfire, sometimes it is overwhelming, and you won't know it is coming until it's too late. Sometimes it's bigger than you. Ask the Cherokee, the Inca, the Romanovs, the Jews, the Confederates, the barbarians, and the Romans. They all know, or else what? Take care, Michelle. The basic acknowledgement, good night, that order demands violence is not a revelation, but to some it may seem like one. The very notion may make some people apoplectic, and some will furiously attempt to dispute it with all sorts of convoluted and hypothetical arguments because it doesn't sound very nice. But something doesn't need to be nice in order for it to be true. Reality doesn't bend over to accommodate fantasy or sentimentality. Our complex society relies on proxy violence to the extent that many average people in the private sector can wander through life without really having to understand or think deeply about violence because we are removed from it. We can afford to perceive it as a distant, abstract problem to be solved through high-minded strategy and social programming. When violence comes knocking, we simply make a call, and the police come to stop the violence. Few civilians really take the time to think that what we are essentially doing is paying an armed band protection money to come and do orderly violence on our behalf. When those who would do violence to us are taken peacefully, most of us don't really make the connection, and we don't even assert to ourselves that the reason a perpetrator allows himself to be arrested is because the gun, the officer's hip, or the implicit understanding because of the gun at the officer's hip, or the implicit understanding that he will eventually be hunted down by more officers who have the authority to kill him if he is deemed a threat. That is, if he is deemed a threat to order. There are something like 2.5 million people incarcerated in the United States. Over 90% of them are men. Most of them did not turn themselves in. Most of them don't try to escape at night because there is someone in a guard tower ready to shoot them. Many are non-violent offenders. soccer moms, accountants, celebrity activists, and free-range vegans all send in their tax dollars and by proxy spend billions and billions to feed an armed government that maintains order through violence. It is when our ordered violence gives way to disordered violence, as in the aftermath of a natural disaster, that we are forced to see how much we rely on those who maintain order through violence. People loot because they can and kill because they think they'll get away with it. Dealing with violence and finding violent men who will protect you from other violent men suddenly becomes a real and pressing concern. A pal once told me a story about an incident recounted by a family friend who was a cop, and I think it gets the point across. A few teenagers were at the mall hanging out outside a bookstore. They were goofing around and talking with some cops who were hanging around. The cop was a relatively big guy, not someone who you would want to mess around with. One of the kids told the cop that he didn't see why society needed police. The cop leaned over and said to the spindly kid, "Do you have any doubt in your mind about whether or not I could break your arms and take that book away from you if I felt like it?" The teenager, obviously shaken by the brutality of the statement, said, "No. That's why you need cops, kid." George Orwell wrote in his Notes on Nationalism that, for the pacifist, the truth that those who abjure violence can only do so because others are committing violence on their behalf is obvious but impossible to accept. Much unreason flows from the inability to accept our passive reliance on violence for protection. Escapism, fantasies of the John Lennon imagined variety, corrupt our ability to see the world as it is and be honest with ourselves about the naturalness of violence to the human animal. There is no evidence to support the idea that man is an inherently peaceful creature. There is substantial evidence to support the notion that violence has always been a part of human life. Every day, archaeologists unearth another primitive skull with damage from weapons or blunt force trauma. The very first legal codes were shockingly grisly. If we feel less threatened today, if we feel as though we live in a non-violent society, it is only because we have ceded so much power over our daily lives to the state. Some call this reason, but we might just as well call it laziness. A dangerous laziness, it would seem, given how little most people say they trust politicians. Violence doesn't come from movies, or video games, or music. Violence comes from people. It's about time people woke up from their 1960s haze and started being honest about violence again. People are violent, and that's okay. You can't legislate it away or talk your way around it. Based on the available evidence, there's no reason to believe that world peace will ever be achieved or that violence can ever be stopped. It's time to quit worrying and learn to love the battle axe. History teaches us that if we don't, someone else will. Jack Donovan. Ha! That's Jack Donovan. He does have a YouTube channel. Interesting. He has 14,000 subscribers. Oh, he is. He's like a buff guy. Very interesting. Wonder if we can see what he looks like.
If we catch crab in Virginia and Maryland, do we file taxes in each state?
No.
Large catches in both? Yes. I'll leave it.
I give you everything you need.
Is this Jack Donovan?
Comfort you and set your mind.
No. This is not Jack
Just
Donovan.
need just
I want to see what he looks like.
start the world. found back in 2011 while I was writing The Way of Man.
This is Jack Donovan.
It was an
Maybe he's a
article about
motivational
Peter
speaker.
Fonda, the actor probably best known for his role in the film Easy Rider. He
Hey,
was a
Johnny
calm
Street Sign.
journalist. He said, "I prefer not to use the words, 'let's stop something.' I prefer to say, 'let's start something.'"
The Tyler script. What about the Tyler script?
Now, the context was a little strange and it was an odd statement.
All
but
kings used violence
something
during
struck
history,
me
and
about
gods used that too.
even then.
And gods used that too in a simulation of old history. You're over that, we're always editing simulation. It's a hard game. Till the universe grows as to be what? How you doing, Johnny? You feeling better? So this is Mr. Jack Donovan. He looks like my friend's dad.
And influences people's lives and changes their lives, yes, you can do that. You can change individuals' lives, and that's great. But you're probably not going to change your world. That's probably a little bit beyond your reach. That's probably a little bit beyond the resources that you have at your disposal. But you can change your world. That's where you have the most power.
Hey,
That's where
Nigel.
you can initiate change. That's where you can start your world.
And it's worth it to note that violence is also subject to interpretation. There are varying levels of violence. That's kind of a basic question, though. As a human being, do you feel generally free to move about and do things that you wish to do, or do you feel generally not free? And that's the general premise with which you can start your questioning process. And within that, or rather outside of that, you're either imprisoned by something or someone in some capacity, or you're mostly doing what you wish to be doing. If you're in an actual prison, you're clearly not free at all. If you're in this sort of societal prison where you have to earn money, and there are certain rules going along with that and types of behavior that are generally allowed, then you're in some sort of a lower level prison, because you need to use that medium in order to trade for things like food and tools. And then the next one up from that is just being in the body, and you can grow food yourself, and you go walk and grab the apple and eat it, but you are still a prisoner to that need for eating. And beyond that, you wouldn't be in the meat suit necessarily. You would just be traversing realms of imagination. When you are playing chess, are you not into a strategic battlefield? Yeah, of course. Chess is war. Sounds like he found his voice. Who found whose voice? Balance means control. Yeah, it's if someone wants something from somebody else and they can't get it by conventional means or just by asking, then they can attempt to use physical force or manipulation or threats. all of which are some forms of violence. Blackmail. $10.34. The guy you just played. Oh. Yeah, Jack Donovan. That's the guy that wrote the thing I read about violence is golden. Or maybe you're talking about the guy that was singing. How do you stop a blackmail? I would assume you don't do things that can be utilized in a blackmail, for starters. And then if you do, then yeah, you got to go find the person that has it and strike up some sort of a deal with them. Because if you don't do that, then it's just an open-ended threat possibility that could just fall on your head at any time. I'm working on my freedom, my thoughts, and my own perceptions that all stop me from full freedom. So you make a pact with the devil. The only way to be free of violence in this realm is to walk away from it, and I am walking a path of love and peace. Yeah, I mean, there's always a choice. There's always the choice. You could say fear is violence. It's a reverse form of violence. Because if somebody is threatening someone else, it's mainly the threat of violence that is where the power lies. Because nobody just hurts other people for the sake of hurting other people. Some people do, but that's not the most common form of it. The most common form of it is to use the threat of pain and suffering to exact some sort of motion or movement or energy out from whoever you're trying to make do something. If you just beat them to a pulp, then you can't use them anymore. What if fear in a reverse universe is turned into power? You mean like if the fearful one was somehow powerful because of their fear? Okay. That's Jack Donovan. Looks like a Nazi skinhead, kind of. Seems like a nice enough bloke. Seems like a nice enough bloke. Okay, well, I've got a couple things to do and to wrap up, so probably going to end this one now. I might do a stream over the weekend, I'm not sure. I haven't had a guest on in quite a little bit, so I might see if somebody can come on this weekend. Perhaps, maybe Sunday. Maybe. He seems like a bit of a twat to me. A twat. I'm glad I've seen you live. Where are you from, Ra? Are you from the States or are you in another place? Romania. Nice. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining, as usual. And I will see you in the next one. Peace, love, and happiness. Darian. Oh, this is Darian. Wait, is this Darian? Like where you've been messaging me from time to time? Is that who Cyber Raw is? Because you're supposed to send me a picture if I remember right. You owe me a picture, Darian. I did not forget. End meeting for all. Okay. Good night. Peace out. I'm sure you'll get it to me sometime. End stream.